Okay, giddy up. Here comes the subtraction. Very quickly, same deal as the addition. You need to have really, really straight numbers and really, really straight decimal points too. Otherwise, it can become quite confusing. So what I want you to keep in mind with subtraction is that when we subtract, sometimes we have to borrow. So the key word now is borrowing. This sum here is a great example. All of these numbers on top are larger than the number underneath. So starting in the top right hand corner, 3 is bigger than 1, 4 is bigger than 2, 7 is bigger than 5, and 9 is bigger than 2. When I subtract, I can go straight through really quickly. Okay, this is one of the easiest sums to do. So starting in the top right hand corner, I start with 3 and I take away 1, and that leaves me with 2. I start with 4 and I take away 2, and it leaves me with 2. Decimal point is already there. I start with 7 and I take away 5, and I'm left with 2. I start with 9 and I take away 2, and I'm left with 7. Okay, they're not going to be like that. You're going to need to borrow. This sum here is slightly different. What you'll notice already is that some of the top numbers are smaller than the number underneath. So the 9 is bigger than the 7, the 5 is bigger than the 4, and the 7 is bigger than the 3. That means that in this sum, we're going to have to borrow. Great. So what I don't want you to do is get into the habit of saying 7 subtract 9 is 2. Because that's not the case. If it was 9 subtract 7, it would be 2. But what you've got is slightly different. You're starting with 7 and you're taking away 9. And that would give you a minus number. That would give you minus 2. And we don't want that. Okay, so the question is, where do I borrow from? This should say subtraction too. Where do I borrow from? Well, I'm going to try borrowing from here. And I have to ask myself the same question. Is the top number bigger than the bottom number? And if it is, I can borrow from it. Unfortunately here, we've got the same problem. The 4 is smaller than the 5. So I try over here. And I ask myself, is the top number bigger than the bottom number? And the answer is still no. So I have to try the number on the end. Is 9 bigger than 2? And the answer is yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow a 10 from this 90. The digit value of this 9 is 90. What's the digit value of 9 in 93? It's worth 90. So I'm going to change this from 90 to 80. I'm going to take 110 and I'm going to put that 10 next to these 3 units. If I put a 10 next to 3 units, I make 13. So the 10 from the tens column and the 3 from the units column, and I've got 13. I'm going to change that 13 to a 12. And I'm going to borrow one of those units and I'm going to put it in the tenths column. So 1 unit and 4 tenths make 14. I'm going to borrow one of those tenths and I'm going to make it 13. And I'm going to put one of those tenths in the hundredths column to make it 17 hundredths. So that's 1/10 and 7 hundredths to make 17 hundredths. So my new numbers across the top, and this needs to be neat. You need to be able to work with these numbers. New numbers across the top. I've got 8 tens over here. I've got 12 units. I've got 13 tenths. And I've got 17 hundredths. That's because I've borrowed. 17 hundredths take away 9 hundredths. leaves me with 8 hundredths. 13 tenths, take away 5 tenths. 13 tenths, take away 5 tenths, leaves me with 8 tenths, decimal point. 12 units, take away 7 units, leaves me with 5 units. And 80, take away 20, leaves me with 60. Last one. 3 is bigger than the 5. Can I do it? Can I start with 3 and take away 5? The answer is no. What about here? Can I borrow from the 2? If I change this 2 to 1/10, won't that mean I've got the same problem as over here? What have I got at the moment? At the moment, I've got 2 subtract 2 is 0. That works. But if I change this 2 to a 1, I've then got 1 subtract 2, and I can't do that. So I'm not going to borrow from the 2. I'm going to go over to the 9, and I'm going to change it to 8 units. So instead of 9 subtract 7, I'm now going to do 8 subtract 7. One of those units is going over here. So 1 unit and 2 tenths make 12 tenths. Right. I'm going to change it from 12 tenths to 11 tenths. And one of those tenths is going over here to make 13 hundredths. 13 hundredths, take away 5 hundredths equals 8 hundredths. 11 tenths, take away 2 tenths is 9 tenths. 8 units, take away 7 units equals 1 unit. 20 or 2 tens, take away 1 10 equals 10. 2 take 1 is 1. Whew. All right, gang, that's it there. If you want to watch it again, I would perhaps skip the first sum and go to sum 2 and sum 3. If you're still stuck, I'm very, very, very happy to help.